In 1955, a man named Ron Davies walked into a Holden dealership in Melbourne, paid cash for a brand new sedan, and drove home to a 4-bedroom house he owned outright. He was 29 years old. He worked one job. His wife didn't work. They had 3 kids, 2 weeks of paid vacation, and a savings account that grew every single month. Ron wasn't rich. Ron was average. Today, to live the exact life Ron lived in, 1955. Same house, same car, same vacations, same savings rate, same stay-at-home spouse, same number of kids in private school. An average Australian would need to earn roughly $400,000 a year. That's not inflation. Inflation is already baked in. That's the real adjusted apples-to-apples cost of replicating a middle-class 1950s life in 2026. And here's the part nobody wants to say out loud. The same math is coming for America. This is the story of how the richest country on earth quietly priced out its own middle class, and what it tells you about where the United States is headed next. You're probably wondering why an American should care about Australian house prices. Here's why. In 1950, Australia and the United States had nearly identical economies. Same GDP per capita, same home ownership rates, same manufacturing base as a percentage of output, same single-income household norm. If you put a 1950s Sydney suburb next to a 1950s Cleveland suburb, you couldn't tell them apart. Same brick veneer houses, same Holdens and Chevys in the driveway, same dads coming home at 5:30 with the newspaper under their arm. Then, somewhere between 1975 and 2005, the two countries took different speeds down the same road. Australia got there first. What happened to the Australian middle class between 1980 and today is not a uniquely Australian story. It's a preview, and once you see the mechanism, the exact policy decisions, the exact financial instruments, the exact corporate consolidations, you'll start seeing them in your own zip code. So let's run the numbers. Then let's name the receipt. To make this honest, we have to define what a 1955 middle-class Australian life actually looked like, not a fantasy. The real numbers, pulled from the Australian Bureau of Statistics, the Reserve Bank's Historical Archive, and census records. Here is Ron Davies, 1955. House, 3-bedroom brick veneer in Melbourne's inner ring, around 110 square metres on a 600 square metre block. Cost, £2,500. That's roughly 3.5 times his annual salary. Car, Holden FJ sedan, brand new. Cost, £950, about 16 weeks of work. Job, mechanical fitter at a factory. 40-hour week, one income. Wife, stay at home, raising 3 kids. Healthcare, free at the public hospital. Doctor's visit, a few shillings. Education, public school free. University when his son went would cost nothing. Australia had free tertiary education from 1974 to 1989. Vacation, 2 weeks paid annually. Family drove to the coast every summer. Retirement, government pension at 65, plus a small employer scheme. He retired at 62. Savings rate, roughly 15% of income every year. Total household cost of this lifestyle in 1955 Australian dollars adjusted to today. About $95,000 a year in equivalent purchasing power. Now hold that number, 95,000. Because here's the same lifestyle, priced in 2026. To replicate Ron's exact life in Melbourne today, here's what an Australian family needs. House. A comparable 3-bedroom inner ring home now costs $1.4 million. To service that mortgage on a 30-year term at current rates, roughly $95,000 a year in repayments alone. Car, a new mid-tier sedan, the modern Holden equivalent, costs around $45,000, financed over 5 years, $10,000 a year. Healthcare. Medicare exists, but private health insurance for a family of 5 is now effectively mandatory to avoid public waitlists, $6,500 a year. Education. Public schools still free, but the equivalent of Ron's son's free university? Today that's a HECS debt of $50,000, and most middle-class families now opt for private schooling at $25,000 per child per year. For 3 kids, $75,000 a year. Stay-at-home spouse. The opportunity cost of one parent not working in 2026, Melbourne is approximately $80,000 a year in foregone income. Money the family no longer has to absorb the rest of these costs. Vacation, utilities, food, insurance, retirement contributions to match a defined benefit pension. Roughly $90,000 a year combined. Added up, $401,500 a year. Pre-tax. That's a household income requirement of just under $580,000. The median Australian household income in 2026 is $98,000. The 1950s middle-class life is now a top 2% lifestyle. This isn't a vibe, this is arithmetic. Now the question every American watching needs answered: how did this happen? Because if it's just inflation or the economy changed, there's nothing to learn, but it isn't. There are 4 specific levers that got pulled in a specific order, and every one of them is being pulled in the United States right now. Lever 1. Housing became an investment asset, not shelter. In 1985, Australia introduced negative gearing, a tax rule that lets property investors deduct rental losses from their regular income. Combine that with a 50% capital gains discount in 1999, and suddenly housing wasn't where you lived. It was where you parked wealth. By 2024, 1 in 5 Australian taxpayers owned an investment property. The result? Home prices decoupled from wages and started tracking the savings of the already wealthy. The US version of this lever is already half pulled. Institutional investors like Blackstone and Invitation Homes now own over 500,000 single-family rentals, a number that didn't exist in 2010. Lever 2. Manufacturing was offshored to balance the trade ledger. Australia made cars until 2017. It made textiles, electronics, appliances, steel. Then between 1985 and 2010, successive governments dropped tariffs from 35% to under 5%, betting that the service economy would absorb the displaced workers. It didn't. Ron's factory job paid the equivalent of $85,000 in today's money. The Uber Eats job that replaced it pays $35,000. America's manufacturing share of GDP has fallen from 28% in 1953 to under 10% today. Same lever, slower pull. Lever 3. Education and healthcare were financialized. Australia had free university from 1974 to 1989. Then it introduced HECS, student loans. The justification was user pays. The result was a generation graduating with debt that delays home ownership by 7 years on average. Healthcare followed. Medicare survived, but a parallel private system grew until opting out meant 18-month surgery waits. The US version of this lever is fully pulled. $1.7 trillion in student debt. Healthcare at 17% of GDP. Lever 4. Wages stopped tracking productivity. From 1950 to 1975, Australian wages and productivity grew together. After 1980, they split. Productivity kept rising. Wages flatlined. The gap, the money the workers used to get, went somewhere. It went to the top 1%, whose share of national income doubled from 5% to 10% between 1980 and 2020. The same chart exists for the United States. Same shape, same split year, same recipient. Here's where people object. But we have iPhones now, air conditioning, streaming. Quality of life is higher. Let's be honest about this. Yes, some things got cheaper. A 1955 long-distance phone call to Sydney from Melbourne cost the equivalent of $40 for 3 minutes. Today, it's free. Televisions, clothing, calculators, all collapsed in price thanks to global manufacturing. But here's the trick. The things that got cheaper are the things you consume. The things that got more expensive are the things you own. Housing. Up 580% relative to wages since 1980. Education. Up 340%. Healthcare, up 290%. Childcare, up 250%. TVS, down 96%. Clothes, down 60%. Long-distance calls, down 99%. You can stream Netflix in 4K on a flat-screen TV that costs less than a week's wages. You just can't afford the house to put it in. That trade, cheaper distractions, more expensive foundations, is the actual transaction the last 40 years made. And it wasn't an accident. It was a policy. Every lever was pulled deliberately by name people in name years with documented justifications. This is the receipt. It exists. We just stopped reading it. Australia is 18 to 22 years ahead of the United States on every one of these levers. That's not a guess. That's the average lag between when Australia passed a major financialization policy and when the US passed its equivalent, negative gearing. Australia, 1985. US institutional rental boom, 2012. Lag, 27 years. HECS student loans. Australia, 1989. US federal direct lending expansion, 2010. Lag, 21 years. Manufacturing tariff collapse. Australia, 1988. US NAFTA, 1994. China PNTR, 2000. Lag, 12 years. housing to income ratio crossing 8 times in major cities. Sydney 2014. Los Angeles, San Francisco, already there. New York 2026 projection, Boston, Seattle, Denver 2030. If the pattern holds, the median American family in 2045 will need a household income of roughly $620,000 in today's dollars to replicate a 1955 middle-class American life. That's not a prediction. That's just Australia's number plus inflation. So what do you do with this? First, stop blaming yourself. If you feel like you're working harder than your parents and falling further behind, you're not imagining it. The math says you are. The deck wasn't reshuffled, it was redesigned. Second, understand which lever is hitting your city and when. If you live in a Tier 1 US metro, you're already at Australian housing ratios. If you're in a Tier 2 metro, you have maybe 10 years before the wave arrives. That's not despair, that's a timeline. Third, stop measuring your life by the wrong baseline. The 1950s middle class wasn't normal. It was a 30-year anomaly created by specific post-war policies. Strong unions, high marginal taxes on the wealthy, capital controls, manufacturing protection, free education. Every one of those was systematically dismantled. Knowing that is not pessimism, it's literacy. Because the people who pulled these levers, they're still here. They have names, they have addresses, they have foundations and think tanks and lobbying budgets, and they're working on the next set of levers right now. Ron Davies died in 2019 at 93. He left his Melbourne house to his daughter. She sold it for $1.6 million and used the money to help her own 3 children put down deposits on apartments. 1 each, 3 generations, 1 house. That's what 70 years of policy looks like, compressed into a single family ledger. Now multiply that by every Western democracy. In our next video, we're going to show you the exact playbook being used to do this same thing to American suburbs right now. Neighborhood by neighborhood, zip code by zip code. We have the documents, we have the buyers, we have the timeline. You won't believe who's holding the deed to the street you grew up on.